Wow, that was fast. The Ayatollah of Iran is no more. The speed of the operation itself is remarkable. The United States had tried doing something similar in Iraq, but Saddam Hussein evaded capture for about 9 months. Meanwhile, in Libya, it was not Allied aircraft, but rather rebels on the ground who ultimately tracked down and ended Gaddafi's life. Iran was a different story. In fact, it was the very first strike of the war that terminated the Ayatollah's time on Earth. However, geopolitics is not a game of chess. Losing the king does not end the game. Rather, we are looking at day one of a far more complicated interaction. So join me today as we discuss how the Ayatollah's life came to an end, the two main mistakes that the Ayatollah made which led to his end in this way, and the succession crisis that Iran is currently confronting. First, a quick recap of what has happened, along with perhaps an answer to a bit of a mystery. As you might imagine, I have been monitoring the situation in Iran closely for weeks now. In a world where we should watch what leaders do, spending all of that money to mobilize materiel to the region conveys a certain credibility in threatening to attack. Now, usually the United States prefers to initiate airstrikes overnight. Doing so takes advantage of U.S. technical expertise, limits the defender's ability to visually identify attacking aircraft, and limits the number of civilians wandering in areas where they could inadvertently be hurt. The special Maduro operation to arrest the Venezuelan president 2 months ago, that was conducted at night. The one-shot bombing run to destroy Iran's nuclear infrastructure last year, also conducted at night. Midnight Iranian time corresponds to 3:30 p.m. on the east coast of the United States. Consequently, despite the metal amassed near the Persian Gulf, I have been going to sleep every night with relative confidence that nothing would happen until well after I woke up. Oops. So when I woke up on February 28, 2026, exactly 1 year after the Oval Office meltdown, to give you an idea of just how much has happened in the interim, I was surprised to find out that we were already in the thick of it with Iran. My initial suspicion was that there was a target of opportunity that justified throwing away the cover of night. And boy was there ever. For the past 8 months or so, the CIA has tracked the Ayatollah's movements, including observing what happened in the midst of Israel's strikes during the 12-day war. Well, the CIA learned that a high-level meeting was scheduled to take place in Tehran on the morning of February 28th. Combined with Iran not accepting proposals of zero uranium enrichment for its nuclear program, and fears that Iran might preemptively strike U.S. assets in the region, the White House decided that it was time to pull the trigger. U.S. intelligence therefore passed along the information about that meeting to Israel, and Israel agreed to take advantage. At 7:30 a.m. Iranian time, Israeli fighter jets departed their bases. At 9:40 a.m., they reached the compound of the meeting. The fighters launched 30 bombs, targeting 2 buildings, one believed to house the Ayatollah and the other with the remaining officials. Among the dead confirmed by Western intelligence, the Ayatollah, the Minister of Defense, the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the head of the Military Council. The war with Iran is likely to go on for days, if not considerably longer. The success of the war is therefore not dictated by the first bombs dropped, but it is hard to imagine a better start for the U.S.-Israeli coalition. Meanwhile, obviously this is a bad outcome for the Ayatollah and the government of Iran overall. No doubt that you will soon be reading 1,000 perspectives about what the mistakes he and others made that got us to this point. Well, I think we should walk through a couple of them now, one proximate and one underlying. The proximate mistake was not taking the threat of an impending attack seriously. It is one thing to not want to spend weeks underground, effectively allowing the mere presence of a couple of aircraft carriers to dictate your entire life. It is another thing altogether to schedule a high-level meeting above ground with multiple targets of opportunity attending. The only way to square that circle is to imagine that Iran believed that it had enough operational security that the United States and Israel would not be aware. I suppose that it is also possible that Iran concluded that such a strike would be impossible, but that would be a whole extra level of incompetence. For someone who survived an assassination attempt in 1981, leaving him with this right hand that many viewers comment on whenever I show this stock video, you would think that he would have known better. Well, given the special Maduro operation before it, I think it is time for foreign leaders to dispense of any fantasy that their locations are secret. The reach that U.S. intelligence has is remarkable. If the United States has assets in the region, you need to default to the belief that the United States knows exactly where you are and act accordingly. The underlying mistake is a bit more nuanced, though I do not want to get too deep into the weeds on this one because I have already produced an entire video on this subject before the war started. I warned that in the event that the Ayatollah fell, you would begin seeing a bunch of hot takes that the true mistake that the Ayatollah made was not finishing Iran's nuclear program sooner. No other country would make that mistake again, and a bunch of leaders are now going to start sprinting toward a nuclear weapon today. What those authors fail to realize is that these hot takes are very much cold takes that play into a false conventional wisdom. Every time this happens, like Libya before it and Iraq before that, you hear the exact same argument. And in the aftermath of these events, there is no subsequent sprint, and we do not see dozens of countries try to build nuclear weapons. Indeed, every world leader already understands that nuclear weapons confer a certain type of insurance policy against regime change. Nothing is learned by seeing regime change in action. This is literally something that one might teach in International Relations 101. It is very painful whenever someone trots out International Relations 101 as carrying deep insights that policymakers do not already understand. And you should react accordingly whenever you see commentary that suggests otherwise. Rather, countries do not try building nuclear weapons because they are incredibly expensive, and the wrath of the international community adds further opportunity costs. By one Iranian official's own estimate, Iran's nuclear program cost the country $2 trillion. Let that sink in for a moment. $2 trillion. Those economic sanctions really start to add up year after year. Had Iran spent that $2 trillion on infrastructure or social programs, it is hard to imagine that there would have been the protests on the streets weeks ago that precipitated the current crisis. Sure, nukes are great for autocratic leaders if you can jump to the point where you actually have the nukes. But you cannot yada 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 past the hard part of actually producing them, suffering the economic consequences of trying, and ducking preventive action from opponents in the meantime. That is why Iran's big mistake here occurred decades ago, and it is why more countries are not going to start building nuclear weapons tomorrow. For our final topic of the day, we need to discuss the succession crisis brewing in Iran right now. Iran does not have a clean line of succession like, say, the United States, where the death of the president immediately transfers the office to the vice president. Indeed, autocratic countries more generally have a problem where if there is a clearly defined successor, it creates incentives for the successor to, how shall we say, hasten the end of the current leader's life. And even reaching the point of having a designated successor is dangerous, because would-be successors who feel slighted might seek revenge. In Iran, there was speculation that the Ayatollah was trying to position his son to be the next leader of the country. Well, now the son lost his biggest advocate. Speaking more generally about what the succession process will look like and how it affects the war incentives, there is a night and day difference between Iran and Venezuela. A couple of months ago, the United States could conduct a Caribbean operation for a few hours, leave, and end up with someone compliant as president, because the Venezuelan system was not full of ideologues. Everyone there was pragmatic and looking to try to maximize their own outcomes. Thus, the United States could dictate to Delcy Rodriguez how Venezuela could spend its oil money, and still have her comply. The alternative for her is to repeat what Maduro experienced, and you can understand why she might want to avoid that. Moreover, the long-run plan in Venezuela is straightforward enough. A democratic system in the country exists. Maduro just distorted it into an autocracy. In turn, the United States did not need to destroy the country's institutions. Rather, all Venezuela needed was a nudge in the right political direction. To be clear, we still have a long way to go to see whether any of that plan will work out. But at least so far, things are working. There will be no such easy button for Iran. There are democratic elections in the country, but even the not-so-democratically elected president is still inferior to the supreme leader's position. The Assembly of Experts runs the succession process for the supreme leader, and it is ideologically inclined as it gets. Consequently, if the next supreme leader tried to adopt a pragmatic position like Delcy Rodriguez, he, and we can safely assume that he will be a he, will soon find himself under domestic threat. I really do not envy who the next leader will be. Either he faces assassination threats from the United States and Israel, or he faces assassination threats from the people who gave him his position. It is the very definition of a no-win situation. Now, in terms of war strategy, this is a decent place for the United States to be in. The plan here is not to try to co-opt the next supreme leader. Rather, the United States seeks to completely revolutionize the Iranian system. The Ayatollah's assassination serves two purposes here. One, it is a rallying cry to get protesters back on the streets. That seems to be working. Despite the country's internet blackout, videos are escaping and showing Iranians cheering out in the public. I should also note that the government and semi-official government media have also released videos of pro-government demonstrations, so exercise some caution in thinking that the regime is about to fall any minute now. Still, convincing people to coordinate on protesting is difficult, when showing up alone may mean that you will be arrested or worse. It is hard to come up with a better rallying cry than the death of an unpopular leader who just killed tens of thousands of protesters, so mission accomplished on that front. The second purpose of the assassination is to create a succession crisis. Remember, the Ayatollah did not have a designated successor. What is happening in Iran as I speak these words are Iranian officials initiating the first steps to convene a formal succession process. What is happening unofficially as I speak these words are Iranian officials trying to establish their inevitability as the ultimate choice, so that others relent their challenges and follow the path of least resistance. That includes trying to take interim control of the government, which would set that person up as the default candidate who is easy to back. If that informal process goes smoothly, then we may end up in a situation where Iran redoubles its resolve, as a hardliner enters office and could more effectively command the war than an 86-year-old former revolutionary. From the US perspective, threading the needle here will be very difficult. In an ideal world, a succession crisis forms where many possible leaders turn on each other, weakening the government's ability to resist citizen uprisings. That causes the government to fall, and a democratic transition then takes place. Perhaps you have heard of the former Shah of Iran's son trying to position himself as a transitional leader and the head of a constitutional monarchy. Yes, again, real words that I have said in the year 2026. It is hard to see how any leadership crisis does not create significant domestic strife within the country, which then starts to threaten the country's already deteriorating infrastructure. Infrastructure that includes oil infrastructure. That means an oil shock and higher prices for consumers worldwide, from the United States to China. But as I mentioned yesterday, threading the needle here is not all that important for the broader geopolitical picture. An Iran that cannot export oil anywhere is an Iran that cannot export oil to China, and that might matter more to folks inside of the Pentagon than the overall price of energy commodities. Zooming out, I often show this picture of Saddam Hussein's statue falling in Iraq. It is iconic, and it represents a moment of hope and infinite possibility for that country. But not all of those possibilities were good, as we all soon found out. Well, Iran finds itself at the same crossroads today. If you want to learn more about Iran's mistake in developing a nuclear program, you can check out the video that I referenced earlier by clicking here. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.